Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello all, welcome back to our course on digital accessibility, and today we will discuss about Web Content Accessibility Guidelines or WCAG. Probably you might have heard about it. We have also talked about this term a couple of times in the introductory slides and some of the previous slides, but today we will discuss the WCAG guidelines and our parallel Indian guidelines etc. in a little bit of detail. So, let us start with a couple of digital accessibility background again, just as a revision module. So, mobile devices are great examples of users dealing with accessibility issues. Just to understand what are the kind of different solutions available at a superficial level, and at a basic level you can just browse through your settings in the accessibility part, and you can just see the closed captioning, the screen reader, the talk back, all of those basic applications you can try and engage with on your phone itself. Many countries designing for accessibility isn't just morally correct, but it is also a legal obligation. That means by law you have to design for accessibility, and that is slowly becoming a mandate in India as well. So, it is high time that we as designers and engineers also stop looking at accessibility as an afterthought and imbibe it in our product development itself, in our design thinking itself from the very beginning. But the good news is it's not a complicated thing, right? It's so we've been trying to understand some basic aspects and the need for accessibility and so forth in our previous sessions, and how we can design for better usability, what are the principles, what are the universal design guidelines, what are the universal design principles, etc. And one more parallel vertical which is there in terms of compliance and laws and mandates is this accessibility standards or guidelines, and they are very easy to understand. So, it is nothing very complicated, they are very comprehensive, it is almost like a long checklist, and you will just have to kind of cross check your interface and see which ones it is fulfilling and which ones it is not able to fulfill. So, let us get started. So, before we jump into the guidelines themselves, let us try to revisit. So, we have already discussed these POUR or POUR principles in one of the previous sessions, and why I am revisiting it before we jump into the WCAG guidelines and the criteria list is because the criteria list itself is divided into these 4 chapters: the perceivability, the operability, understandability and robustness of the interface itself. So, let us just browse through it a little bit and then we can jump into it. So, what is the meaning of perceivability? So, perceivability by its terminology means that the user can perceive or sense the content or the interface elements by the means of multiple modalities or any modality for that matter, right. So, the point being that if we are catering to special population or special use cases where there might be cognitive deprivation or there might be sensory deprivation, we have to be careful about using multisensory information. So, we have to be careful about using multisensory information, display as well as feedback. So, either tactile display along with that your screen based display, or talkback, which is an audio feedback. All of those aspects need to be incorporated. So, people with varying abilities can also access the content and perceive the content itself. So, in a forthcoming lecture, we will also discuss in detail about these emerging input and output devices, right. So, when we say when we talk about tactile display, for example, what is a tactile display? What is the meaning of that? There is a small image here, but of course, we can learn a little bit more about what are the various companies which are making it, what are the limitations of those kind of input output devices, etc. So, there is a session lined up on emerging multimodal input output devices, and this would feed into again the perceivability aspect of your technology or your interface, and how you can use those input output devices in order to make the system highly perceivable or highly operable. So, perceivability is something which can be enhanced by incorporating multiple output devices, right. So, basically the system is giving different types of output. So, speaker is an output device, your display, your screen is an output device, your tactile display is an output device, there can be other such smell based or other kind of output devices as well. And so, basically perceivability of a system is very much in line with output devices or output technologies. Similarly, when we will move into the next category, which is the operability. Operability means that the user can successfully control the system, navigate the system, they can use or interact with the buttons or whatever the system is, the interactive aspects. So, in the operability, emerging input devices is something which is lined up or aligns nicely. So, your keyboard is an input device, your mouse is an input device, your you know, all of those other VR based input devices are there, your gaming console is there, a joystick is there, a touchpad is there, like one which is there on your laptop, a mic is also an input device. So, all of these things are input device, but when we talk about say emerging input devices, it can be non-tactual interaction as well. So, for example, computer vision based camera, facial recognition based input device can be there, iris based recognition, all of those input devices can also be there. And then of course, your mic or voice commands is also a input device. So, operability of a system means that it should enable operability through various means. Of course, all of these are different kinds of tangible input devices, but also when we think about your digital interfaces, the button sizes, the color contrast and all of those things, whether the button is visible or not, as we discussed in the previous lecture about affordances, whether it is giving us enough affordances that we are able to operate, then there is a call to action. So, if you think about it, all of this is very much entangled and very much interrelated with each other. So, an affordance, for example, directly links to the perceivability of the interface. So, if I am able to perceive an affordance and I then which calls me, which gives me a call to action, and then I am able to operate or do that action, is operability, right. If I am able to see or perceive that call to action, that is the perceivability part of it. But if it is allowing me to complete that action, then that is operability. So, all of these may seem that, oh, this is so obvious, why is it so structured and why, The point is that apparently it is not as obvious, because most of the systems we see around us, they are not very accessible. So, all of these frameworks and all of these models can help us consciously evaluate our systems and see whether our systems are actually contributing, or do they have all of these features or not. Similarly, understandability. So, one is the perceivability. So, one is that I can sense the information, I can see, it is allowing me to see. So, for example, if there is a button, if there is a screen based button which has a signifier, I think we had a discussion about it. So, one is the color contrast, the size of the font, all of those things are related to perceivability. So, like color, size of the font, so that I am able to sense it. Then whether the whatever is written, is it cohesive, is it in line with the content of the website or the content of the interaction as well. So, for example, if it is a an application, job application site for some CDS, for example, right. So, at the end of it, if the button says click here, right, and or if the button is just blank, for example, you have a good color contrast, you have a good size font which is catering to the perceivability part. Your button itself is clickable, which is catering to the operability part. But if you just say click here and not the word submit, for example, then it is not catering to the understandability part. So, the cohesiveness or the consistency of your interface with the rest of the context is very important. So, appropriate tone of choice of words, appropriate copywriting, appropriate workflows. If it is too long, too many steps, if I am not getting appropriate feedbacks at every step, then it becomes non-cohesive and non-understandable to a lot of audience. And here maybe so some of the sensory difficulties or motor difficulties you can align with perceivability and operability. So, for example, if I am a person with visual impairment, perceivability might be the biggest challenge for me, as well as operability, that I locating the button and then clicking it can be a big challenge for me. But if I am not I do not have a sensory deprivation, but I have other cognitive decline or cognitive deprivation. So, for example, people with ADHD, people with dyslexia, people who are aging, who have limited cognitive bandwidth, there in those cases understandability becomes a major issue. So, perceivability and operability may be little bit engaged, but understandability becomes a major issue. So, if you see for different kinds of users, all of these 4 parameters may the importance of it or the priority may vary, but from a digital design perspective we have to look at all of these parameters, all of the 4 of them, in order to say that yes, our system is accessible to a diverse set of audience. So, basically the understandability says that users should be able to comprehend the content and learn, and it should be easy to learn. So, basically what when we say easy to learn or a flatter learnability curve, for example, learnability curve is how much time you take to learn, right. And so, if it is very steep, right, then it is very very difficult to learn. But if it is like the complexity is very high, and then all of those factors. If the complexity is low, then the learnability curve can be flatter, right, and then the time required can also be lesser, right. So, if it this is called a learnability curve. and then remember how to use it also. This is important. So, if it is easier to learn, onboarding is easy, but then if you are not banking your interface on the familiarity or related concepts or cultural contexts or you know, how your users understand a certain set of interfaces, and you design something radically different, then also it becomes very difficult for them to remember. While in design sometimes we are taught that yes, think about something out of the box, think about this, think about that. Out of the box does not always mean different, right? Out of the box or in an attempt to make it very different, we should not dilute all of these factors as well. So, we have to be very careful and we have to look for a trade off, that okay, you need uniqueness in design of course, but then you cannot dilute understandability, you cannot dilute on the learnability or the memorability of it, right. So, it has to be a trade off. Then the fourth is that there has to be maximum compliance with existing technologies, like a variety of platforms such as a laptop or web or non-web based offline applications, mobile applications, tablet based applications, different orientations. You are able to, your tech is able to run on all of those platforms, and it is allowing maximum usability across all of those platforms as well. So, if it is if a system is only accessible through a keyboard or mostly accessible through a keyboard, then probably its mobile version will not be as operable. So, then as during the development part itself, we have to be very careful about tailoring all of these aspects and looking at all of these aspects before designing or while designing, so that the users are able to choose the platform they want to use, right. So, that opportunity that should be with the user, and you as a designer or a developer have to be careful just to make the system as robust that it can just fit into any kind of an interaction device. So, with this background, let us move into WCAG guidelines. So, again as I said, the WCAG guidelines are divided into these 4 categories themselves, and each guideline is called a criteria, actually criteria for compliance. So, we shall now move to the WCAG website itself, and we will see how and in what ways it is divided. So, this is the website. I have also provided the link at the end of the slides, so for you to follow, and even if you do not find the link, that is also okay. You can just type in a search engine WCAG guidelines, and it will take you to the same website. So, we will just go around a little bit and try to understand. So, it is developed by this W3C organization. If you click here, it will take you to the W3C, which is the World Wide Web Consortium, right. And but we do not want, you can explore their work as well. You can see how and where, what kind of work they are doing. One of the major contributions of this consortium is that they have developed these guidelines, right. So, this is so there is a navigation here on the left side. So, right now we are at this WCAG2 at a glance. So, this is just like a summary. So, I just wanted you to take you through these. And so, there is a set of long list of guidelines, and they are, as I said earlier, that they are divided into these 4 categories, which is again the perceivability, operability, understandability and robustness, same terminologies which are there in the POUR principles. And so, under perceivability, if we see, they ask, there are several criteria. For example, provide text alternatives for non-text content. So, for example, if I have a visual content like a photograph, right. So, as per the perceivability criteria, it should always have an alt text or an alternate text, which will enable it to be accessed by a screen reader or a talkback module or a talkback algorithm. So, this is like a gist of it. So, for example, if you click on it now, it will, what it will do is take you to the main document, right. So, now here you can see that the main document itself is also here. On the left side, there is a navigation, long navigation panel. Don't get scared just by looking at it. I would recommend browsing through all of it. You can take your time, but don't get scared, and we will discuss a little bit about each section. So, you have an idea, it is more of an icebreaker, but as and when you will actually implement it, you will have to go through the required sections, whatever applies to you. So, for example, 1.1 is section 1.1 is say text alternatives. So, under this guideline 1, so principle 1 is perceivable. Under that it is 1.1. So, again it is divided and categorized very beautifully. This document itself is very beautifully made. So, I recommend referring to this. So, for example, as I said, text alternatives, then there is a description, provide text alternatives for any non-text content so that it can be changed into other forms people need, such as large print, braille, speech, symbol or simpler text. So, anything which is non-text needs to be there. So, again under this, under this there is again a 1.1 non-text content. All non-text content is presented to the user as a text alternative that serves equivalent purpose. Then it is also linked to, there are several resources right here itself. So, one is this show full description. The moment you unfold it, there are more details about what is the meaning of non-text content in different circumstances. So, for example, controls. If a non-text content is a control, it accepts user input, then its name that describes its, then it has a name that describes its purpose. It has to have a name. So, this is the same thing that we mentioned about the submit button, for example, or the, instead of having click here or no text on the button itself, right. Similarly, time based media. So, if non-text content is a time based media, then text alternative at least provide descriptive identification of the non-text content, right. So, and it also directs you to other guidelines. So, for example, refer to guideline 1.2 for additional requirements for media. So, what is the meaning of time based media? Like an audio clip or a video clip, right, which starts and ends. So, then it has to have you know, a textual description as well. Similarly, all of these like a captcha, if it is just like a decoration, it's pure decoration, it is only used for visual formatting and is not presented to users, then it is implemented in a way that it can be ignored by assistive technology. So, this is also important. You as a developer or the designer have to identify that, okay, this part is just for decoration. this image, this floral frame for example, is just for decoration, then it needs to be tagged as to decoration so that it can be ignored by the assistive technology. So, similarly, now we can close it, maybe you can go through it. So, similarly, there is here another button which is called information or understanding this criteria, understanding 1.1.1. So, if we click here, it takes us to a very long document which is particularly about this understanding criteria 1.1.1, and it tells us about all of these aspects, what is the intent of this criteria, what is more additional information, more benefits, why this criteria should be used, what benefit will it give us if we include this criteria, how it will make your system more accessible. Then if you can also find a list of examples in order to understand. So, for example, a data chart, if a bar chart compares how many widgets were sold in June, July and August, the short label says figure 1 sales in July, June, July, August. The longer description identifies the type of chart, provides a high level summary of the data. So, this is for the alt text, this is not a caption, this is description of the visual content in a textual format. High level summary of the data, data trends, implications comparable to those available from the chart. Where possible and practical, the actual data is provided in a table in the form of alt text itself. So, it can be accessed by screen readers and other formats also. Similarly, there are other examples. So, for example, this is a very interesting example, a photograph of a historic event in content discussing diplomatic relationship, for example. The same image is used in different contexts intended to explain nuances in diplomatic encounters. The image of the president shaking hand with the prime minister appears on the website discussing intricate diplomatic relationship. The first alternative text reads, President X of country Y X shakes hands with Prime Minister Y of country Y on January 2nd, 2009. Additional text, alternative text describes the room where the leaders are standing as well as the expressions on the leaders' faces and identifies the other people in the room if they are there in the picture. The additional description may include on the same page, may be included on the same page as the photograph or in a separate file associated with the image through a link or other standard programmatic mechanisms. So, I think this is very important, and all of these things you can just like maybe go through in for each one. If you have any issues, you can try to click this button understanding and it will take you to this all of this. So, other than that, one thing which also you might be noticing, this level A, it is written here level A. If we keep scrolling, there is also level AA and level AAA. So, you can apply these filters as well.